They say that the ancient Citadel holds more secrets than one can count. Secrets woven into the stones themselves. After more than a decade patrolling its halls, I thought I knew each corner, each echo, every eerie chill that permeates the night air. Yet, even I was unprepared for what lay hidden just beyond the realm of the known. It was one of those bone-chilling nights. The fog settled thick over the capital, turning the city's lights into blurred orbs against the darkness, while the damp air crept into my bones. I walked my usual rounds, the only sound the soft, rhythmic thud of my boots on the stone floors. The cold had a way of biting sharper inside these walls, as if the ancient stones themselves harbored a memory of centuries past. Memories of whispers and shadows, of royal intrigue, of lives lost and secrets buried. Then I heard it, a faint noise, a whisper, or perhaps just the wind seeping through the narrow cracks in the wall. But this sound, it was different, somehow. I stopped, straining my ears, but there was nothing, just silence. Yet, that silence felt like it was hiding something that demanded my attention. I'd learned long ago to trust these instincts. After all, a good guard never ignores his gut. I continued down the corridor, drawn toward the sound's source, my hand unconsciously drifting to the cool metal of my flashlight. The path led me down a forgotten passage, tucked away behind a set of old rusted gates I'd never noticed before. Strange, I thought. I'd walked these halls countless times, but that night they felt different, as if the Citadel itself had secrets it was ready to reveal to me alone. The air grew colder as I ventured deeper. Damp and stale, it carried the weight of ages, pressing down on me with each step. The faint torchlight flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. I reached the end of the passage, where a small, nearly invisible door waited, half buried under layers of dust and cobwebs. My heart hammered in my chest, a sense of foreboding settling over me. I was far from superstitious, but something about this door, this place, stirred a primal fear. Gripping the cold iron handle, I pulled the door open. The hinges groaned, protesting years of neglect, and the door creaked open to reveal a small, hidden chamber. The room was barely illuminated by the dim glow of my flashlight, casting eerie shadows on walls lined with ancient tapestries, their colors faded and threads frayed. And there, in the center of the room, lay a solitary, leather-bound manuscript on a pedestal. I stared, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I'd seen relics of history within the Citadel, armor, weapons, the trappings of kings and queens long dead. But this was different. I could sense it in my bones. This manuscript wasn't meant to be found, at least not by someone like me. As I approached the pedestal, I hesitated. The air felt heavier here, thick with an almost tangible presence, like the room itself was watching me. I swallowed hard, willing myself to be calm, before reaching out and lifting the manuscript. The leather was worn, brittle beneath my fingertips, and the faint scent of old parchment filled my senses. A smell that somehow felt alive, as if the manuscript held centuries of secrets pressed into every fiber of its pages. I opened it slowly, careful not to damage the fragile pages. The ink was faded, but the words were still legible, each line crafted with meticulous precision, as though the author had known that these words would need to withstand the test of time. My eyes scanned the first page, and I felt my pulse quicken. This was no ordinary record or journal. It was something darker, something hidden intentionally, an account of secrets that were meant to stay buried. The words spoke of betrayals, of alliances forged in shadow, and of blood spilled to protect a secret that, if revealed, could alter the very essence of the royal lineage. It was as if I'd stepped into another world, a world where honor and loyalty were twisted into tools of manipulation and power. My mind reeled with each sentence, each revelation, as I realized the depth of the darkness that lay at the heart of the realm. Then, just as I turned to the next page, I heard footsteps echo down the corridor. My heart leaped into my throat, and I quickly closed the manuscript, tucking it under my arm as I darted back toward the door. Whoever was out there, I couldn't let them find me here, not with this in my possession. I slid through the shadows, pressing myself against the wall as the footsteps grew louder, closer, before stopping just outside the door. The silence was deafening. I held my breath, willing myself to be invisible, my fingers gripping the manuscript so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, my every nerve on edge. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the footsteps retreated, fading into the distance until there was nothing but silence once more. I exhaled, my breath shuddering in the stillness. I'd been a guard for over a decade, seen my share of unsettling moments and strange happenings within these ancient walls, but this was different. This felt personal, as though the Citadel itself had chosen me to find this secret, to carry this burden. As I made my way back through the corridors, the weight of the manuscript pressed against my side, its secrets pulsing with a life of their own. I felt as if the shadows were watching me, judging me, perhaps even warning me. Every instinct told me to hide the manuscript, to put it back and forget it ever existed. But my curiosity had taken root, and it was a force too powerful to ignore. What was in these pages that had been hidden so deliberately, so carefully? And why now, after all these years, had I been the one to find it? I returned to my quarters, the manuscript still clutched tightly in my hands. I sat down on my narrow cot, placing the book on my lap, and took a moment to collect my thoughts. The Citadel, this place I'd thought I knew so well, was revealing itself to me in ways I'd never imagined. This wasn't just a discovery. It was an invitation into a world where loyalty and honor were nothing but masks for something far darker. Opening the manuscript once more, I read by the dim light of my bedside lamp, immersing myself in a tale of deceit and treachery that felt both foreign and chillingly familiar. Each page unveiled new layers of secrets, names and places shrouded in mystery, and alliances that hinted at betrayals yet to be fully understood. And then, amidst the carefully penned words, I found a name I recognized, though I could hardly believe it was written here, in this context, within these walls. The revelation struck me like a blow, the truth pressing down on me with an almost physical weight. The name was that of a figure I'd seen pass through these halls, a figure associated with the very royal family I'd sworn to protect. I felt a sickening realization settle in. This manuscript didn't just hold secrets of the past. It implicated the present. The Citadel's dark history was far from over, and now I was entangled in its web, caught between the loyalty I'd pledged and the truth I now carried. As the first light of dawn broke over the Citadel, I sat there, the manuscript open before me, its dark secrets spilling onto my hands. I knew, deep down, that I could never go back to who I was. This secret, this truth, had marked me, and I could feel it working its way into my very soul. The choice lay before me, as stark as the coming day. I could remain silent, let the royal family's secrets rest in the shadows, Or I could risk everything to bring them to light. Days had passed since that cold night, but the manuscript's secrets clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. Every quiet moment seemed to echo with fragments of words I had read, memories of the whispers that now lurked in every corner of my mind. The Citadel, which had once felt like a second home, had taken on a new, darker presence. Now, its walls seemed to pulse with the secrets it held, each stone a silent witness to the legacy of betrayal and deception woven into the monarchy's fabric. It wasn't long before I found myself scouring my memory for moments that might shed light on the manuscript's claims. As I recalled those years patrolling the halls, little incidents began to surface. Memories that I'd once dismissed as trivial or strange, now flashing with new meaning. I remembered a moment from years ago, a fleeting encounter with a young noblewoman known for her silence and watchful eyes. Lady Helena was her name, or at least that's what the others called her, though no one seemed to know her origins. She'd been present during several royal ceremonies, always in the background, her gaze never wavering. I'd seen her whispering with senior figures, people one would expect to have no dealings with the likes of her. At the time, I thought nothing of it, assuming it was the casual intrigue of court life. Now, her gaze seemed far more knowing, as if she'd been privy to secrets I was only beginning to uncover. I couldn't shake the thought of Lady Helena's piercing look, the way her eyes would settle on a person as though she could read through to the soul. One evening, I'd even overheard her exchange a few quiet words with a high-ranking advisor, a man whose loyalty to the royal family was said to be unquestionable. They had spoken in hushed tones, their voices slipping into the shadows. But I caught a single phrase: the heart of the Citadel. The words had struck me then as unusual, vague, and cryptic, yet I'd let them pass without a second thought. Now, they rang through my mind with new urgency, as if the echoes of that moment held a truth I'd failed to see. Driven by these thoughts, I found myself drawn to the Citadel's lesser-used corridors, the forgotten hallways hidden in the maze of passages that sprawled beneath the more traveled paths. I needed, to understand the connections between what I'd read in the manuscript and the figures who passed through these walls. My instincts guided me, pointing me toward places I'd once ignored, doors I'd walked past 100 times without a second glance. The Citadel, I realized, was a labyrinth not only of halls and chambers, but of secrets and lies. And I was beginning to understand that some doors were never meant to be opened. One evening, as I explored a deserted section of the Citadel, I stumbled upon a room that looked as though it hadn't been used in decades. The dust lay thick over every surface, undisturbed, yet a faint, lingering scent of something metallic hung in the air. I couldn't place it, but it felt foreboding, as if the room itself were a warning. On the wall hung a portrait, faded with age, of a young royal, her face bearing a striking resemblance to one of the current members of the royal family. It was uncanny, the same sharp gaze, the same line of the jaw. And below it, a plaque bore the name Evelyn of the shadowed lineage. I studied her face, captivated by her eyes. They seemed to speak of sadness, of a life that had known isolation and fear. My mind raced with questions. Who was Evelyn? Why had I never heard of her? And why was her portrait hidden away in a forgotten room, left to gather dust? This wasn't just a forgotten relic. It felt like a carefully erased piece of history. I searched the room, looking for any document, any scrap of paper that might explain Evelyn's place in the royal bloodline. But all I found were empty shelves and a lingering sense of loss. It was as if every trace of her had been systematically erased, removed from the annals of history. Yet, someone had chosen to leave this portrait behind, a solitary reminder of her existence. I wondered if it was meant as a marker, a silent protest from someone who'd refused to let her memory vanish entirely. The more I discovered, the more the past seemed to close in on me, enveloping me in shadows of the Citadel's long-forgotten history. Each step deeper into this mystery felt like a descent into darkness, as if I were unraveling a thread that could lead to the undoing of everything I'd ever known. I began to understand that the Citadel wasn't merely a fortress of stone and mortar. It was a fortress of secrets, each layer of its walls a testament to the weight of the lies it guarded. That night, I returned to my quarters, unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched. The shadows seemed to follow me, stretching longer as I turned each corner, and a chill crept down my spine. I couldn't dismiss the thought that my investigation was stirring forces that had lain dormant for centuries. For the first time in years, I felt vulnerable, as if my every step was being observed by unseen eyes. As I lay in bed, thoughts racing, memories from my early days at the Citadel resurfaced. I recalled conversations with fellow guards, whispers of the Order of the Shadows, a phrase that had been thrown around as a jest among us rookies, a term for the mysterious senior officials who seldom appeared in public but seemed to wield significant influence. The Order had always been a joke, a ghost story we told each other during late-night rounds. But what if it was more than that? What if the Order of the Shadows was a real force, a hidden hand within the Citadel that controlled what stories lived and which ones were erased? I began to see connections, invisible threads linking figures I'd thought unremarkable. Figures like Lady Helena, Evelyn of the shadowed lineage, and the high-ranking advisor. Together, they formed a tapestry of hidden alliances and concealed motives. These were no ordinary people. They were part of a network, a shadow within the monarchy that had always been there, lurking beneath the surface. I knew that if I continued down this path, there would be no turning back. Each piece of the puzzle drew me further into a world where loyalty and duty were mere masks for something far darker. I began to feel a strange sense of dread, a foreboding that gnawed at me, warning me of the dangers ahead. But my curiosity had transformed into something more powerful, a need to understand, to know the truth, even if it cost me everything. That night, sleep eluded me, and I found myself staring at the manuscript on the table by my bed. I reached for it, opening it to the page where I'd left off. The words felt heavier, their meanings more ominous, as if the manuscript itself were a living thing, urging me forward. I read of alliances forged in secrecy, of figures erased from history to protect the purity of the royal bloodline, and of one ancient prophecy, a prophecy that warned of an heir born in shadow who would one day rise to claim the throne. I closed the manuscript, my mind racing. The Citadel's history wasn't just dark, it was dangerous. A story woven with threads of betrayal and secrecy. I was caught in a web that stretched across centuries, a legacy of shadows and silence. And as I looked out at the Citadel's looming towers, silhouetted against the night sky, I realized that this journey would lead me to truths I could never unlearn. The night air seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if the Citadel itself was alive, waiting, watching. And I knew, with a certainty that sent a chill down my spine, that the path I'd chosen would change me forever. Days melted into nights as the manuscript's secrets consumed my thoughts. Each word I'd read was now an echo that followed me through the Citadel, and each encounter felt charged with hidden meaning. The halls I once knew so well now seemed foreign, cloaked in an aura of mystery that gnawed at my mind. Then came the night that changed everything. It was past midnight when I was called to join a private gathering, a rare occurrence, reserved only for select officials within the Citadel. I'd heard rumors about these gatherings, whispers among the guards of shadowy meetings where matters of utmost secrecy were discussed. But I'd never been invited. Until now. The messenger who delivered the summons was a stern, silent figure, clad in a dark cloak that obscured his face. He handed me the invitation with a nod, his eyes cold and unyielding. As I read the elegantly written note, I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was a formal request to join the Council of Shadows that very night. The name alone sent my mind spinning. I'd thought the Council of Shadows was a myth, a ghost story conjured by restless guards on late shifts. The order was said to be an ancient sect, a hidden force that protected the royal family's most dangerous secrets. And now, I was being called to its inner sanctum. I barely had time to process what this meant before the messenger turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving me alone with the weight of the invitation. That night, I made my way to the meeting room, my mind a storm of questions and suspicions. The hallways were eerily silent, my footsteps echoing against the stone walls as I followed a winding path through the Citadel. The further I went, the more secluded the corridors became, until I found myself in an unfamiliar wing of the Citadel. The air felt dense, charged with an energy that seemed to pulse beneath the surface. At last, I arrived at a heavy oak door, guarded by two silent sentries. They didn't speak, only nodded as I showed them my invitation. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with shadows that seemed to shift and dance in the flickering candlelight. Inside, I found a handful of figures seated around a grand table, each one cloaked in darkness, their faces obscured by shadow. The atmosphere was thick with secrecy, and the air smelled of ancient parchment and melted wax. One figure, seated at the head of the table, gestured for me to take a seat. I obeyed, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but my curiosity held me captive. The meeting began in silence, a silence that felt ritualistic, as though it were part of some unspoken code. Finally, the figure at the head of the table spoke, his voice low and measured. "We are gathered here tonight to discuss matters of grave importance to the realm," he said, his tone heavy with authority. "You have been chosen, William, because you have shown loyalty and discretion. But what you are about to hear must never leave this room." I nodded, my heart pounding as his words hung in the air, laden with hidden implications. The leader continued, his gaze piercing through the shadows. "The Citadel stands as a symbol of power, but power is sustained by sacrifice. For centuries, our duty has been to safeguard not just the royal family, but the truth that lies beneath their lineage. We are the keepers of the shadowed bloodline, the guardians of secrets that must remain buried." He paused, and I felt his eyes on me, assessing, judging. I swallowed hard, sensing that my response in this moment could change my life irrevocably. "And if those secrets were to be unearthed?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. A murmur rippled through the room, and I felt a chill settle over me as the leader's gaze hardened. If those secrets were unearthed, it would be a disaster for the realm. The foundation upon which the monarchy stands would crumble, and with it, our way of life. The words struck me like a blow. This wasn't just about protecting a family or a legacy. It was about safeguarding an entire structure of power, a structure built on foundations that few could ever understand. And now, I was being asked to carry that burden. As the meeting continued, I was given instructions, a list of tasks to perform, each one designed to ensure that the Citadel's secrets remained hidden. Among them was an order to monitor certain individuals within the Citadel, people suspected of harboring knowledge of the shadowed bloodline. One name on the list caught my eye: Lady Helena. The revelation hit me with the force of a hammer. Lady Helena, the enigmatic figure who had once shared cryptic words with high-ranking officials, was now a subject of suspicion. Had she uncovered something similar to what I'd found? Was she, too, caught in this web of lies and secrecy? And if so, what had she seen? What did she know? The rest of the meeting passed in a haze, my thoughts spinning as I struggled to process the weight of my new responsibilities. When I finally left the room, the air felt heavier, as if I were carrying an invisible burden. The guards nodded as I passed, their expressions unreadable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that every step I took was being recorded by unseen eyes. In the days that followed, I found myself shadowing Lady Helena, watching her movements and listening for anything that might betray her knowledge of the shadowed bloodline. It felt wrong, an invasion of her privacy, a betrayal of my own values. But the Council's orders had left me with no choice. One evening, I spotted her slipping away from a formal gathering, her figure disappearing into a secluded corridor I hadn't explored before. My heart raced as I followed her, my footsteps soft against the stone floor. She moved quickly, her steps purposeful, until she reached a small door at the end of the corridor. I watched from the shadows as she opened the door and slipped inside, closing it quietly behind her. I waited a moment before approaching, my hand resting on the cool metal of the door handle. Every instinct told me to turn back, to abandon this path before it consumed me. But I'd come too far, and the need for answers had become an obsession. Pushing the door open, I stepped into a dark, narrow passage that seemed to spiral downward, deeper into the heart of the Citadel. The air was thick with dust, and the walls felt as though they hadn't been touched in years. I followed the passage, the flickering light of my torch casting eerie shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. At the end of the passage, I found myself in a hidden chamber, dimly lit and filled with ancient artifacts, scrolls, manuscripts, and relics that seemed to pulse with history. And there, in the center of the room, stood Lady Helena, her back to me as she examined a faded tapestry on the wall. She turned at the sound of my footsteps, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, we stood in silence, the weight of the secrets between us pressing down like a physical force. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "Neither should you," I replied, unable to keep the tremor from my voice. Her gaze softened, and I saw a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "Some secrets are too dangerous to remain hidden. But you already know that, don't you?" I nodded, my heart heavy with the knowledge we now shared. I could see the weariness in her face, the toll that carrying these secrets had taken on her. In that moment, I realized that she, too, was a victim of the Citadel's shadows, trapped in a web of lies and betrayal. "Will you help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Will you help me uncover the truth?" The question hung in the air, a challenge and a plea, and I felt the weight of it settle over me. I knew that if I accepted, there would be no turning back. Together, we would face the darkness that lay at the heart of the Citadel, risking everything to expose the lies that had shaped our lives. As I met her gaze, I felt a surge of resolve, a determination to see this journey through to the end. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. I will help you." The days that followed felt like a fever dream, each hour blurring into the next as Lady Helena and I worked in secret, piecing together fragments of the Citadel's hidden history. Our alliance was fragile, built on mutual suspicion and shared desperation. We both knew the risks, knew that if we were discovered, we would be branded traitors to the realm, perhaps even erased from history like so many before us. Yet, we pressed on, driven by a need for truth that outweighed our fear. Our first step was to delve deeper into the Council of Shadows. Lady Helena, with her connections and her keen eye, had gathered more than her share of secrets over the years. She knew the hidden passageways, the ancient vaults, and the forgotten rooms that lay beneath the Citadel's main halls, places where only the most trusted were allowed to tread. One night, we ventured into the oldest part of the Citadel, descending into a labyrinth of tunnels that snaked beneath the fortress. The air grew colder, thick with the smell of damp stone and dust, as if the very walls were watching us. Our footsteps echoed eerily, each sound magnified in the darkness. The Citadel's stones seemed to whisper secrets, the air alive with the memories of lives long past, of voices silenced and truths buried. As we moved deeper, Helena shared what she knew of the Council's history, how it had been formed centuries ago to protect the monarchy's legacy. But that legacy, she said, was a carefully curated myth, a tale woven from half-truths and omissions. The Council's real purpose was to protect the royal bloodline, not from external threats, but from the truths that lay within it. "The Council doesn't guard the monarchy's honor," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the silence. "It guards its secrets. And the greatest secret of all is the truth about the royal bloodline. That's why they've gone to such lengths to bury the past, to erase those who would question it." I listened in silence, the weight of her words pressing down on me. The Council wasn't just an organization, it was a living entity, an invisible hand that shaped the realm's history, deciding which stories would be remembered and which would be lost to time. And we were now trespassers in its domain. We reached an old vault, a massive iron door marked with the crest of the royal family. Helena pulled a key from a hidden pocket and slipped it into the lock, her hand steady as she turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a chamber filled with shelves of ancient scrolls, dusty tomes, and artifacts that pulsed with an almost tangible sense of history. Together, we searched through the vault, examining records and manuscripts that seemed to span centuries. Many were written in languages I could barely decipher, filled with symbols and codes that spoke of dark pacts and forbidden knowledge. Each document felt like a piece of the puzzle, a fragment of the story we were trying to uncover. But the pieces didn't fit. Not yet. Then I found it. A faded, fragile scroll tucked away at the back of a shelf. The parchment was brittle, and the ink had faded with age, but I could still make out the words. It was a genealogy, a record of the royal bloodline dating back hundreds of years. As I scanned the names, my heart stopped. There, listed among the lineage of kings and queens, was the name Evelyn of the Shadowed Lineage, followed by a single cryptic phrase, "The Forgotten Heir." I felt Helena's presence at my shoulder as she read the words, her face pale in the dim light. "The Forgotten Heir," she whispered, her voice thick with a mixture of awe and fear. She was erased from history. They hid her existence to protect the royal line, to keep the bloodline pure. The implications were staggering. If Evelyn had been hidden, her bloodline severed from the official record, then the monarchy's claim to the throne was based on a lie, a carefully constructed illusion that masked a truth far darker than either of us had imagined. "What happened to her?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Helena shook her head, her expression haunted. "I don't know. But if the council went to such lengths to erase her, she must have posed a threat to the throne, something that couldn't be ignored." The more we uncovered, the more dangerous our investigation became. We both knew that if the council discovered our efforts, they would stop at nothing to silence us. And yet, we couldn't stop. We were driven by a force greater than ourselves, a need to understand the truth, even if it cost us everything. Our research led us to a hidden library within the Citadel, a vast, shadowed chamber filled with ancient books and manuscripts. The library was guarded by a set of iron gates, their bars twisted into intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with an eerie, almost hypnotic energy. Helena produced another key, unlocking the gates with a practiced ease that spoke of her long familiarity with the Citadel's hidden pathways. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint smell of old parchment. The shelves were lined with books bound in leather, their titles written in faded gold leaf. We moved through the aisles in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts, our footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust that covered the floor. As I scanned the titles, one book caught my eye, a thick, leather-bound tome with no title on its spine. I pulled it from the shelf, feeling the weight of it in my hands, and opened it to the first page. The text was written in a flowing, elegant script, detailing the origins of the Council of Shadows and its mission to protect the purity of the royal bloodline. But as I read further, the words took a darker turn. The Council, it seemed, had been tasked not only with protecting the monarchy, but with purging any elements that might taint the bloodline. This included erasing individuals deemed unfit to carry the royal blood, a practice that had led to the systematic removal of heirs, children, and even entire branches of the family tree. The more I read, the colder I felt. The council was not a protector of honor or tradition. It was an instrument of control, a tool used to manipulate and shape the royal lineage according to its own twisted vision of purity. And Evelyn, the forgotten heir, was one of its victims. Helena read over my shoulder, her face pale as the truth sank in. "They killed her," she whispered, her voice shaking with barely suppressed rage. "They killed her because she threatened their version of the royal family. They erased her to keep their lie alive." I closed the book, feeling a wave of nausea wash over me. The council's methods were ruthless, its goals unyielding. They would stop at nothing to protect their secrets, to preserve the illusion they had so carefully crafted. And we were now standing in the way of that illusion. As we left the library, a sense of dread settled over me. The shadows seemed to follow us, clinging to our footsteps as we made our way through the Citadel's winding corridors. I could feel the weight of the secrets we carried, the knowledge that had the power to shatter the very foundation of the monarchy. We were no longer merely seeking the truth. We were uncovering a history of violence and control that had shaped the realm itself. That night, as I lay in my quarters, I felt a chill settle over me, a bone-deep fear that I couldn't shake. I had spent years serving the monarchy, believing in its honor, its legacy. But now, I saw it for what it was, a structure built on shadows, sustained by secrets and lies. The Council of Shadows was not a guardian of truth. It was a guardian of power, willing to do whatever was necessary to preserve its control over the throne. And as I drifted into a fitful sleep, one thought echoed in my mind. If they were willing to erase an entire lineage to protect their version of history, what would they do to us? The truth weighed on me like a chain, binding me to a burden I hadn't asked for. Daylight offered little comfort. Every shadow in the Citadel seemed to whisper, to watch, reminding me that I now held a forbidden knowledge. And that knowledge had changed me, stripped away my illusions, and replaced them with a dark, unsettling truth. Everything I had sworn to protect was built on lies. Helena and I continued our work in silence, meeting in hidden corners of the Citadel, exchanging whispers and glances filled with shared understanding. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that we weren't just learning about the past. We were challenging the very foundation of the realm, a foundation built on betrayal, blood, and a perverse idea of purity. One evening, as we combed through a trove of old letters in a forgotten room, we stumbled upon a document that sent a shiver through both of us. It was a decree, signed by a monarch long dead, ordering the removal of all those with questionable lineage. The language was vague, but the implications were clear. The council had systematically purged individuals from the royal family, erasing entire branches of the bloodline to maintain the integrity of the throne. My mind reeled as I imagined the horror of it, the families torn apart, lives ended in silence, all for the sake of preserving a lie. I could feel my anger boiling beneath the surface, a fury that seemed to consume every thought, every feeling. How many lives had been sacrificed, erased, simply to keep the royal line pure? And what right did they have to decide who was worthy, who was fit to carry the blood of the monarchy? Helena's hands trembled as she read the decree, her face pale and drawn. "They've committed atrocities," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. "This isn't about honor or loyalty. This is control, manipulation, genocide." The word hung between us, heavy and undeniable. I'd spent my life believing in the ideals of the monarchy, in the honor of serving a legacy that stretched back through centuries. But now, that legacy felt tainted, poisoned by the knowledge that it had been upheld through violence, through the cold, calculated destruction of lives. As we read further, we found another document, a journal entry written by a member of the council itself. It described the purging process in detail, recounting the calculated decisions to erase certain members of the royal family who had deviated from the acceptable lineage. The entry was clinical, detached, as though the author were writing about a harvest rather than human lives. I closed the journal, my hands shaking with rage. This was the truth that the Council of Shadows had guarded so zealously, the truth that lay at the heart of the Citadel. And now, that truth was a weight pressing down on me, a force that threatened to crush everything I'd ever believed. Helena looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of determination and sorrow. "We can't keep this secret, William. If we do, we're complicit in their crimes. We become part of the lie." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle over me. She was right. This wasn't just a secret. It was a crime, a betrayal of everything we held dear. But to reveal it would mean exposing ourselves to unimaginable danger. The Council would stop at nothing to protect its power, to silence those who dared to challenge its authority. And yet, as I looked at Helena, I felt a flicker of resolve, a sense that we could no longer stand by and allow this darkness to continue unchecked. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Helena took a deep breath, her gaze steady. "We find a way to bring this to light. We gather evidence, enough to show the world the truth about the council, about the monarchy. And when the time is right, we reveal it. The path before us was dangerous, treacherous even. We were about to challenge a force that had controlled the monarchy for centuries, a force that had erased countless lives and manipulated history itself. But as I looked at the documents scattered before us, the evidence of the council's crimes, I knew we had no choice. Over the next days, we worked tirelessly, gathering every scrap of evidence we could find. Each document, each letter, each fragment of history was a piece of the puzzle, a testament to the horror that lay at the heart of the Citadel. We recorded everything, creating a detailed record of the council's atrocities, a record that would one day expose the truth. But with each new discovery, I felt myself changing. The man I'd been, the loyal guard who believed in honor and duty, was fading, replaced by someone darker, someone who had seen the truth behind the mask of power and could never unsee it. I felt a bitterness settle over me, a sense of betrayal that cut deeper than any wound. One night, as I sat alone in my quarters, I found myself staring at my reflection in a small, cracked mirror on the wall. The face that looked back at me was weary, lined with shadows and secrets. I barely recognized myself. I'd spent years serving the monarchy, believing in the ideals of honor and loyalty. But now I saw those ideals for what they were: illusions, tools used to control and manipulate. I felt a deep sorrow, a grief for the man I'd once been, for the life I'd believed in. But I also felt a strange sense of freedom. For the first time, I saw the monarchy, the Citadel, the council for what they truly were. And I knew that I could no longer be part of the lie. As the days passed, I felt a growing sense of resolve. Helena and I were taking on a force larger than ourselves, a force that had shaped the realm for centuries. But we weren't alone. There were others, whispers of dissent among the ranks, quiet voices who, like us, had seen the darkness that lay at the heart of the Citadel. We reached out to them, sharing our knowledge, building a network of allies who were willing to risk everything to expose the truth. One evening, as we met in a hidden alcove beneath the Citadel, Helena placed a hand on my shoulder, her gaze fierce. "We're close, William. We have enough evidence to reveal the council's crimes. But once we do this, there's no going back. They will hunt us, and they will stop at nothing to silence us." I met her gaze, feeling a surge of determination. Let them come. We've lived in the shadows long enough. It's time to bring the truth into the light. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of peace. The fear, the uncertainty, they faded, replaced by a clarity I hadn't known in years. I was no longer a guard, a servant of the monarchy. I was a guardian of truth, a protector of the people who had been erased from history. And as I looked at Helena, I knew that together we would face whatever came, that we would stand against the darkness, even if it cost us everything. The truth had changed me, had reshaped me into someone new. And as I prepared for the battle ahead, I felt a strange sense of pride, a pride that came not from loyalty to a crown, but from loyalty to something greater, to justice, to truth, to the memory of those who had been silenced. We would bring the council's secrets to light. And perhaps, in doing so, we would free the Citadel from the shadows that had haunted it for centuries. The dawn came slowly, a soft, gray light creeping over the Citadel's towering walls. As the sun rose, so did my resolve. Today was the day we would expose the council's secrets, the day we would bring to light the centuries of lies, betrayal, and blood that had built the monarchy. Helena and I had gathered everything: the documents, the decrees, the journal entries, each piece of evidence that bore witness to the council's crimes. We'd chosen a location just outside the Citadel's walls, a place where we could display the evidence without interference, where the people would see it before the council could suppress it. We had allies stationed throughout the city, loyal guards and trusted confidants who would ensure the documents were distributed widely, that the truth would spread like wildfire. As we made our way through the corridors, the weight of our mission pressed down on me. Every step felt final, like the closing of a chapter. The Citadel, once a place of honor and duty, had become a prison of secrets, and I was ready to leave it behind. But I knew that by the end of this day, nothing would ever be the same. We reached the gathering spot just as the sun rose higher, casting a golden light over the square. People had begun to gather, drawn by the rumor of a revelation, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. I could see guards stationed at the perimeter, their expressions wary. They were loyal to the throne, yes, but they were also human. They too had families, loved ones, lives that could be touched by the truth we were about to reveal. As Helena and I stepped forward, a hush fell over the crowd. I felt a sense of vulnerability, of exposure, as though we were standing on the edge of a precipice. But Helena's hand on my shoulder grounded me, reminded me of the strength we shared. We weren't alone. We were part of a movement, a force greater than ourselves. Helena raised her voice, her tone steady and resolute. People of the realm, we stand before you today not as traitors, but as guardians of truth. We have uncovered evidence of a hidden history, a legacy of lies that has shaped our lives, our monarchy, our very way of being. The Council of Shadows, a body that has ruled from the shadows, has manipulated the royal bloodline, erasing lives to maintain an illusion of purity. A murmur rippled through the crowd as Helena held up the documents, her voice unwavering. These documents reveal the crimes committed in the name of power. They show the erasure of an entire lineage, the destruction of lives, the manipulation of our history. We have been loyal servants, but loyalty cannot blind us to justice. Today, we bring these secrets into the light, for all to see. I stepped forward, my heart pounding as I addressed the crowd. We have dedicated our lives to the Citadel, believing in its ideals of honor and duty. But we have seen what lies beneath. Sacrifices made in the name of control, innocent lives taken to protect a false legacy. We can no longer be silent. The truth must be known. The crowd began to stir, faces shifting from curiosity to shock, to anger, to determination. I could see the impact of our words, the slow dawning of realization as the truth took root in their minds. This was no longer just our burden, it was theirs as well. Together, we would face the consequences, whatever they might be. But as the words hung in the air, a sharp cry rose from the back of the crowd. A group of council guards pushed forward, their faces hard, weapons drawn. My heart sank as I realized that the council wouldn't let us leave without a fight. They couldn't afford to let the truth spread, to lose the grip they'd held on the realm for centuries. Helena met my gaze, a flicker of fear in her eyes, quickly replaced by resolve. "This is it, William. Whatever happens, we've done what we set out to do." I nodded, a fierce pride swelling within me. We had revealed the truth, had broken the chains of secrecy that bound us. And no matter what happened now, no one could silence what we had unleashed. The people knew. The truth was out. As the guards closed in, I drew my weapon, my pulse steady, my mind clear. I would defend this truth, this light we had brought into the world, with every ounce of strength I had. Beside me, Helena stood firm, her gaze unwavering as we faced the coming storm together. The crowd surged, their voices rising in protest, a wave of humanity standing between us and the Council's enforcers. I felt a surge of hope, a sense of unity that transcended fear. The people were with us, their strength amplifying our own. We were not alone. A struggle ensued, the crowd pushing back against the guards, a fierce determination in their eyes. Some of the guards hesitated, casting uneasy glances at each other, at the documents scattered across the ground. Perhaps they, too, were questioning the loyalty they'd sworn, the secrets they'd protected without understanding. In that moment, I saw the possibility of change, of a future shaped not by shadows, but by truth. When the dust settled, we stood victorious. The Council's enforcers retreated, their resolve shaken by the will of the people. Helena and I were left standing in the square, surrounded by allies, by friends, by those who had heard the truth and chosen to embrace it. As I looked at Helena, I felt a deep sense of peace, a weight lifted from my shoulders. We had done it. We had brought the shadows into the light, had shown the realm what lay beneath the mask of power. And now, we were free. In the days that followed, the documents we'd uncovered spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the realm. The monarchy was forced to confront its history, to face the blood that stained its legacy. There were trials, reckonings, moments of darkness as the people struggled to come to terms with the truth. But there was also hope, a new beginning, born from the ashes of the old. Helena and I became symbols of a new era, figures of rebellion and truth. We traveled the realm, sharing our story, urging others to seek the truth, to question, to look beyond the surface. And everywhere we went, we saw the seeds of change, the glimmers of a future that was finally free from the shadows. Looking back, I knew that we had paid a price for our actions. We had sacrificed everything, our loyalty, our safety, our very identities, to bring the truth to light. But as I stood beneath the open sky, the wind in my hair, the sun warm on my face, I knew it had been worth it. The Citadel, once a fortress of secrets, was now a monument to transparency, to the courage of those who had dared to seek the truth. And as I took Helena's hand, feeling the warmth of her presence beside me, I felt a deep, abiding peace. We had done what we set out to do. We had broken the cycle of lies, had freed the realm from the shadows that had bound it for centuries. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Subscribe to Shadows of the Crown for more tales of hidden truths and royal mysteries. What do you think lies behind the next door? Share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, every crown casts a shadow.